Hello and welcome to the Worn and Wound podcast. My name is Zach Kazan. I'm the managing editor at Worn and Wound. Thank you for joining us today. We have a really fun episode. I'm joined today by Worn and Wound co-founder Zach Weiss. Zach, how's it going?
Pretty good. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is our
questions.
this is our roughly monthly Q&A episode where we field questions from Instagram and our Worn and Wound Plus Slack channel, which of course we'll leave a link to so you can join it if you want to get in on this next time. As always, we have a pretty good group of questions here covering a wide range of topics. We have at least one sandwich related question, which I'm glad to see is a returning theme in these Q&As. I think it's completely appropriate to ask us about sandwiches.
100%. I mean, I ate a sandwich today, so I'm prepared.
Same. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Before we dig in to the questions, of course, we'll do a wrist check. Zach, what are you wearing today?
I have on my Longo One 101.029.
Not bad. That's a pretty good watch, right? The Longo One. They make okay stuff.
Yeah, not bad. Doesn't suck. I'll put on the doesn't suck side of things.
Yeah. No, that's pretty good. An excellent watch. I'm wearing my James Lamb Origin Series watch.
Very nice.
Today.
Look at us with our precious metals.
Yeah. Mine's silver, so I've come in second place in the Olympics, as always. It's kind of like where I live. So it's
they don't even hand out white gold.
No, they don't, but they could, in theory. We both have you kind of like off-center dials happening today. That's
oh yeah, look at that, my favorite.
Yeah. I know you're a big fan of that. I'm kind of like I'm growing into it. Like that honestly was something that I had to kind of like move past when I was like selecting this watch. It's I love a lot of things about this watch, but like the off-center dial wasn't something that like immediately struck me. But I love it now. Like it completely works. With the rest of the design. So
works particularly well with those because he like builds that sort of handmade background behind it. I feel like if it was in the center and around it, it would feel, I don't know, less like a watch floating in art. Or something.
Yeah, 100%. Let's get right into the questions. I think we've got a bunch that we can choose from here. Zach, I'll start off by asking a question that we got via Instagram from Kyle Long 3. That's his username. He asks, "Are luxury quartz watches going to make a comeback?" Which I guess implies that they left, that they went away. Which I guess they probably did for a period of time. But do you have a take on luxury quartz watches and kind of like the state of watches in that category?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it sort of depends on how you're defining it. To start, is it just a matter of price point sort of a thing? Because I'd argue there certainly are luxury quartz watches currently available. Grand Seiko and Citizens come to mind probably first. I guess maybe it's almost like our Swiss luxury quartz watch is going to make a return. And I'm a little less familiar with kind of the offerings there. Like I don't know if do Patek and AP have like a couple quartz watches? Like I don't know. No, they might.
Well, I mean, AP for quite a long time made quartz Royal Oaks for like the ladies market. I'm not sure if they still do. I know they make smaller mechanical pieces for the ladies market now. And of course, like Patek had the early was it the Beta 21 movement? They were so like certainly there were like examples of high-end luxury quartz watches from like the early days of quartz. The first thing that came to mind when I read this question was like the more recent Cartier quartz tanks, and also like the example. Other watches in the Cartier collection too have quartz movements. I feel like that's an area where those watches kind of shine for enthusiasts. I hear about a lot of people who like, they're not necessarily dress watch people, but they want to own like an iconic, like piece of watch design or watch history, and like a quartz dress piece like a Cartier tank is kind of like a perfect sort of like, wear it like 3 times a year, like dress piece. But I also think
Yeah.
about these, like more, for lack of a better word, like jewelry focused pieces, like, gem set stuff and like,
Mhm.
diamond set stuff. Often you see those things targeted at the ladies market. We're seeing a lot of, um, sort of a resurgence in interest just very recently in those types of watches,
Mhm.
smaller watches, like cocktail watches, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's an area too where I think luxury quartz might make a comeback if it ever actually went away.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it all depends on what the goal of using quartz is there, right? Like,
Yeah.
is it about bringing the price down on some of these watches for certain consumers, or yeah. I mean, I'd be more interested in like developments within quartz,
Sure.
which that I probably don't imagine will happen the same way, like outside the watches I already mentioned. Like, I don't think we're going to see plus minus 1 second a year high accuracy quartz coming out of these big Swiss luxury watches brands anytime soon. But I mean, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. I mean, we could both be wrong about
We
so
could both
many
be wrong.
things on this episode. That's the beauty of a Q&A pod.
Yeah,
You're free to be
certainly.
free to be wrong infrequently.
We have the right to be wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. You want to ask a question from the Slack?
Certainly,
Thread?
certainly. I like this one. Caught my eye when I was first looking at them, from Steve Fiello. If you from 5 or 10 years ago looked at your collection today, what would they be surprised to see gone, and what would they be surprised to see in the collection?
That's a good question. I think, I mean, my tastes have like kind of shifted a lot, like over the course of 10 years. I think most people, if they're honest, or just curious kind of about like watches, I think that's normal, for
Mm-hmm.
tastes to shift. I think like, there was a period, there's a time when I bought a Rolex Submariner. I bought, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the exact reference number offhand, but it was like the 6-digit reference with the ceramic bezel, not the newest one, but the one before that was out for quite some time. I bought one of those and I thought like, oh, this is a watch I'm going to own like
Mm-hmm.
forever. And I just got very bored of it, like a lot quicker than I like anticipated that I would. So like the version of me that bought that watch would probably be surprised to see it out of the collection, and surprised to see like no Rolexes in
Mm-hmm.
the collection, because I kind of like I bought that watch and then like I traded it for like a Sea Dweller, and then I also owned an Explorer 2 at one point. Like I really had like a Rolex kind of like mini phase,
Mm-hmm.
quite some time ago, and it would be hard for that version of Zach to kind of imagine, like not having any Rolexes at all. But I feel like I'm better off for it. Not that there's anything wrong with Rolexes. I just sort of like found something, like an area that's like much more um, rewarding to me,
Mm-hmm.
like, to collect. I guess like, by the same token, I'd probably be, 10 years ago, I'd probably be surprised to see a watch like the James Lamb, that I'm wearing, which is
Yeah, I was
like,
gonna say we're actually both wearing watches. I feel like that would be surprised to see.
yeah. So what on your end would be something that like you owned 10 years ago, or roughly that long ago, that like you'd be surprised to have given up at this point?
Yeah, I mean, my collection's changed so radically over the years. Like even like since COVID has
Mm-hmm.
ended, like it's gone through kind of a process of refreshing on a dramatic way. Like, to look at the year, but like I didn't own a Grand Seiko before that. Now I feel like like I have three, and there's other watches I want.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I don't think I would imagine practically anything in my collection right now, but like particularly Alonga, like that was, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's not even something I think I imagined a year ago, and then I just sort of saw the pathway to it and gave myself the existential crisis to get it by turning 40, and
Yeah.
just figured why not go for it. But once again, I can't remember exact watches, but like there was a time when I had to unload a lot of watches because I needed the money. And
Mm-hmm.
so like a lot of those watches are watches I really liked and had some meaning, particularly my Hamilton Intramatic,
Mm.
which the Panda dial, which was such a cool watch. And I got it at I got it for a very good price because it was right around when I left my last job to go full time at Worn and Wound. So that really was a long time ago now. And I didn't have any money, so I was able to get it for a good price, such that I could make that reasonable. And it was just, such a cool watch, so cool looking, great story, like under the radar. It's one of those like collector's pieces sort of things. Even the fact, I don't even think the value on those has changed much. They kind of like topped out at $5 or something, and I don't even know where. I haven't looked at one in a while, but yeah, that really felt like a special watch to me, and it was hard to let go of. But that's sort of also the value of watches versus other things, is that when you need to, you can get out of them. And that's part of, hopefully without taking a loss kind of a thing. But that is part of part of why I like the hobby, frankly, is like, I know I've spent a lot, but I always feel like it's still there. It's maybe minus some percentage, but it's still there.
I go through that mental exercise sometimes, and I never quite finish it because I'm a little worried to like complete the math equation and actually figure out like how much of it is actually still left in my collection. Because like you can get, more money back in a watch than like, for example, like a car or like other luxury items or whatever. But not all of it, and especially if you are like interested in collecting sort of like the more offbeat stuff, which I tend to be like more drawn to these days, like. You're just going to take a haircut sometime. You mentioned COVID and kind of like going through watches during COVID. That really, like looking back, feels like an accelerator almost for like collectors, who kind of like came into the hobby at a certain point. Like, I feel like there's like a lot of like trading and like juggling of collections during that period. Certainly, I went through that. You went through that, and I think we can both point to like multiple people in our orbit. Who probably like did a lot of buying and selling during that COVID period.
Yeah, I mean, we were like festering in our homes, reading about watches. The watches were coming out, so it was very the like. I mean, whatever. It was a crazy time for so many reasons, apart from the obviously pandemic. But the FOMO times of like, I'm going to miss out on this watch if I don't buy it now. Thankfully are behind us, but that definitely was driving purchases.
That was really the height of it, of like the like camping out on your laptop at a certain point and during the day, like, figuring out like what the Swiss time is and what the equivalent is on the East
and people
Coast.
talk about strategies of like, make sure your Apple Pay is uploaded and set so you can just do the fingerprint. That's the fastest way. I'm like, I don't know about that.
And then the inevitable outcry and hysterics of when the website doesn't work or there's a some sort of issue, and you've got the brand owners and Instagram like asking for a mea culpa or like going on the defense. Like it got really strange for a minute there. I don't miss those days. I'm glad we're past that for a whole bunch of reasons.
I think on a personal level too, it's just like while I still definitely see watches that I feel like compelled to buy in a way that's like, I certainly an aspect of being a collector and enthusiast, like there's no reason to ever feel as compelled to buy something as I sometimes feel compelled to buy. Like I think of that. There's the meme with Kendall from Succession where it's like, it's, cuts it off by like, I think if I don't do this, I'm going to die.
Yes.
From like the last episode. And it's like that feeling, that's like just resonates, I still get that from occasion, but it was just way too often back then. And I can avoid it now. I'm like, look at your collection. Look how beautiful it is. You know, you don't need it. It's like all that new watch is going to do is take away from that other great watch. In some ways,
No, for sure. That's a healthy way to view it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I wonder if I'm there or not. It's
no, I know.
It's
an idealized version of myself.
A constant work in progress. Okay, that was a really good question. Thank you, Steve, for asking that. Steve always asks really good questions for these Q&As. I'll look another one from Instagram. This is another one from Kyle Long. Actually, he asks, should COSC certification on $1,500 price points be a no-brainer? And then is COSC overrated? I think what he's getting at there is, well, I guess like just the value of COSC chronometer certification on watches at a at a particular price point. What do
Yeah.
you where do you come down on that?
I think there might be a certain price point where I don't know if the actual certification is needed so much as a like, and not all, a lot of watches from extremely high end brands don't actually have the certification, but you're like, I trust them when it's regulated in house and several, whatever that they're doing it. Um, I don't know if it's $1,500 just based on what I know of movement costs and things like that. Like, you have to be sort of, that's a pretty, like, the rest of the watch will suffer almost, like that's a pretty frugal thing. Like, getting the chronometer certified movements is an expensive endeavor, especially if it's like a smaller brand order kind of a thing. So but that aside, I don't know the number, maybe it's 3K or something like that. I do think that mechanical watches should be, if not certified, there should be a level of like attention paid to the accuracy and chronometry of it. And I kind of, at a certain point, I find that to be a very attractive element of watches too. It's not the only thing I look for, but it's certainly like something like a Spring Drive, like that very much brought me into Spring Drive. Or, I mean, Grand Seiko is a good example of brand because they do not have
They don't do COSC certification.
They don't do COSC certification. They're, I think, I don't know if they could they? Maybe they could now. There's some things that in the 60s that there was a whole story about them entering the trials.
Politics involved with
politics. Yeah, exactly. And but like their movements are all regulated actually slightly beyond chronometry specification, any of them, the 9S64, for example. It's like, and I like that this is an expensive watch, not just because it's pretty, but because it's got a really good movement in it too,
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I don't know that I have much to add there. I think I agree. I like to see, chronometer certification on any watch. Obviously it doesn't make, like you said, financial sense for a brand to do it on a particularly inexpensive watch, but it's nice to know that the brand cares to certify, to have the movement certified, that chronometry is like, at least at some point, kind of like in the production of the watch, at some point it's front of mind. I think that's to me what it certifies.
It's also, I mean, and to the second part of that question though, like this once again, for what I know about the process, like COSC certification, it means that the movements you bought from Sellita, Edda, whatever, are going from Sellita. I think that they're actually sort of like, they're looked at by Sellita to make sure like certain movements can be certified, others can't. Like they know sort of like by their own testing if they're even able to meet that level of specification. And then they go through that testing and then they get sold to a brand with the papers. And then the brand puts them into the movement, right? Or into the watch. And it's not really tested again. And then, there's other tests like German tests, and I think the Metis test where it has to be a cased movement, which I think is like, that's a whole nother level of thing. To me, if I'm getting a watch that says COSC on a chronometer or whatever, if I were to be really anal, I can say it should be within the plus minus 4, 6 or whatever. But to me, it just means they're buying the best movement from that company, third party company that they could at the time.
Yep.
And that I like, even more, obviously if it's way out of whack, that's an issue, but it's like, it's the better movement.
It tells you something about like where the brand is at, like philosophically, and like how they're like putting, the watch together, how they're putting a package together for the consumer. Like it's something that's important to them if they're buying the COSC movement. And I think there's, like for it, a hyper accurate movement will be like appealing to different people in different ways and at different levels. But I think, certainly for me, it's appealing. I think for a lot of watch nerds, like the movement matters and accuracy matters. So, it definitely has value. I don't think it's, to answer the question directly, I don't think it's overrated at all. I think it's probably like properly rated, for the most part. Thank you for the thoughtful questions. Kyle Long 3. We certainly appreciate it. Do you see another one in the Slack group that you want to ask, Zach?
What's an extremely popular watch that you dislike from Aloha J?
An extremely popular watch
I
that
have
I
to
just
think
like.
about it for a second.
Oh, I mean, this one comes immediately to. I mean, I've got a very obvious answer.
I have an answer too.
The Moonswatch.
Okay.
I mean, it's a watch. I mean, when I write about the Moonswatch, anyone who's read the articles I've written about the Moonswatch will probably recognize that I'm like not a huge fan of the Moonswatch. I'm a big fan of Swatch. I really admire Swatch and have like a connection to Swatch, for years, and admire them a lot. And I just feel like the Moonswatch is this is like the snobbiest take I have probably, but it's just like it's a weird sort of like it's just like not an expression of Swatch that I like. Like there's so many like fun original Swatch designs, and then like the Moonswatch is literally kind of like a plastic replica of something else. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the Moonswatch. I've never made that a secret. That's I think a very popular watch that I'm just like not super into.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I don't know. I wasn't expecting that, but I mean, I think that makes total sense. That wouldn't be what I guess I wouldn't have thought of it, but I don't wear mine anymore. It definitely, the novelty wore off, and when I do wear it, it just it's honestly the bezel. The bezel looks like it has a sticker on it, and just feels too cheap. I like the case, and there's aspects of it I do like, but overall, but then just the whole roller coaster ride that has been the Moonswatch to now end up online.
Yes,
which is an interesting twist that I guess everyone both expected, yet somehow didn't expect, yet didn't care when it kind of happened. I didn't care.
I didn't care either. It was, I mean, this is, if you weren't aware, we'll put a link to it in the show notes. We wrote about it in Watches, Stories, and Gear this past week. It's kind of like breaking news in the Moonswatch world. The 4 of the core Moonswatch models are finally available online, something that Swatch had sort of promised like very early on, and then they kind of like didn't.
But then they like deleted that promise. I feel like it was said by an employee and then like scrubbed. I
think that's basically I feel like someone talked out of turn, and like it's weird
that it's 4 because there were 5, and the one that's not there is the one I have, which I think is Jupiter, like the sandy colored one.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Which is strange that it's not there. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, the watch I was going to pick. So an extremely popular watch that you absolutely dislike. I don't know if I might tone down absolutely there to just dislike,
Okay.
turn it down from 10 to 9. I don't like Royal Oaks.
Okay. Speak on this. I don't think I've ever heard you really talk about Royal Oaks on a podcast. So I think this is a good opportunity.
It's probably because I also just am not very interested in them. And I think my opinion on them certainly might be colored by the hype around them. I mean, which hasn't died down, but was certainly also quite rampant in the earlier days. I mean, that watch has been very popular for a while. It wasn't just like a COVID darling, though I know it got much more popular and expensive. But sort of in the early days of going to watch meetups, particularly Red Bars in the city, there was just a certain icky snobbiness around the Royal Oaks that really put me off. And while obviously like a beautifully made object, it's like I'm not saying it's not a quality watch. It's obviously it's a luxury watch. It's made as you would expect it to be. The style never really spoke to me so much that I could like really get into. I'm not an integrated sports watch person, period. So I mean, though I like the 5711 Nautilus is more like between the two, I'd choose that one if one were to choose, just based on the aesthetic. But yeah, it's just a watch that when I see that, I think about jerks.
Yeah,
purely and simply. And you know what? That has only gotten worse.
Yeah,
frankly, I mean, there's some really jerky things that have gone on with some of that culturally in the last few years. I don't know. I don't have to say. Sorry, everyone. If you have it, congrats. You're not a jerk, I hope.
Well, I mean, do you know that for sure? I don't know that you can. I don't know that you can say that with any degree of certainty. I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I'm also like, I've never been like a huge Royal Oak fan. I wouldn't say I dislike them. I just like, I'm kind of neutral on them. And I agree with you completely that there's like a culture around that watch that's just um, like I don't find particularly appealing
Yeah.
at all. Um, it's just it still feels like a culture of flexing as opposed
Yes.
to a culture of like appreciating great watchmaking. And I do think that like it's an incredibly well made watch, particularly the bracelet. Like whenever I hold a
Hmm.
Royal Oak, I am always like impressed with the bracelet. Um, which is not something I can say about a Nautilus. I think a Nautilus bracelet by comparison like almost feels kind of like chintzy is not the right word because it's not chintzy, but like it's not as um it's just not as impressive
I don't think
to
I've
me.
had a I don't think I've had either on my wrist in probably at least 8 years. And the 5711 like was like once or twice there would be somebody around. I mean, the Royal Oaks you see more often.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so I can't speak. I can't quite do the apples to apples comparison here. But
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm also working on like not a huge sample size. Like I don't encounter these watches on a regular basis. I do have a friend in our local collectors group who has a handful of Royal Oaks. He's a pretty serious collector, and he's a very nice guy, and he's not a jerk at all.
Good.
And so I just want to like point that out. Like not
I have a
every
close friend with a Royal Oak chronograph, but yeah, two I think actually not a jerk at all. Great guy, good friend. I just will mock him when he's wearing. No.
Yeah, no, and I frankly I do the same thing, and I think like most like non-jerk Royal Oak owners know that there's a culture problem with those watches. They seem to freely admit it. But the watches are good enough in their estimation to like to transcend that. But I do think that like it opens up an interesting kind of like side question on like how important like the collector culture is around any particular watch. And that's something I thought about at Geneva Watch Days, which is like so focused on like independent watch brands and just sort of like the vibes around those watches are so different than kind of like the big Swiss luxury brands that are conglomerate owned. And I think like the culture does matter, to me. Like as I get like into this, into the industry and into like the collecting hobby more deeply, like that becomes more important for me personally, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's like, I mean, do you want to be that guy? Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't get to go to Geneva Watch Days, obviously, but like, I'm kind of curious to see it from even that perspective because it is more collector driven, or at least initially was. It's sort of morphing over quickly. I imagine by next year, if I do go, it'll probably already feel different to you from the year before, and just in terms of the scale and commercialness of it.
Yeah.
But I feel like even within indie brands, there are brands that have crowds, right? Like
sure, yeah.
Yep. And we should get them to play like, I don't know, tag or something. Like not like tag, like we should get the Journe guys and the versus the I don't know, what would be a good brand.
So like what are we doing? We're pitting them again. Is this like a Thunderdome situation or what?
It's a little of Thunderdome.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Laser tag. It's a laser tag.
Yeah. Get the Journe guys in the laser tag arena. Yeah.
Versus
that's
the Day Buffoons.
Yeah. Oh man. That's a thought for next year. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone because I don't want to start making comparisons.
Yeah, no, we got to step away from that.
Yeah,
Sorry about that. Yeah.
All right, I'll take the next one here from Slack. Let's go with this question from Ian Ehrenwald. He has a Christopher Ward related question. He writes, C60 Trident Lumiere, hot or not? On paper, it seems to have it all at a reasonable price, but real life can be somewhat disconnected from the hype. Were there any opportunities for journalists to have hands-on time? We did not have hands-on time with this watch. I think we've got a request out to get one in.
We should have one within a week or two.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, if nothing else, like we'll see them at Windup, in really a matter of weeks at this point, which is, it's rapidly approaching. Yeah. What do you think of the C60 Trident Lumiere, Zach?
I think it's super cool. I mean, I kind of like don't know what you wouldn't like about it, apart from maybe the price. It is a decent jump up from like the other C60s, but they've always sort of had special C60 watches that have cost more, the Apex, the Concept, the Elites, and stuff like that. So it's not like out of left field that they would do that. Yeah, I like that it focuses on the Globalite material because that looks super cool. And my experience, I don't know if that's what is on the Tudor Black Bay Pro, but it's certainly similar. It's a ceramic lume composite, so you get these like 3-dimensional lume bricks. I mean, that's cool technology, and they pushed it to about the max, I think, in terms of height, because they'll hit the hands eventually. Right. So you get this really cool 3-dimensionality on the dial, and if you're into lume, I mean, that's just sweet. But I like the way it looks. I think it has a nice like graphic sort of modern element to it, particularly because the hands are inverted in the shape, which is interesting. Love titanium. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I like it. It's cool. You know, I don't know if it's like the watch I'm going to run out and buy, but I'm not like, it's like, I don't know. I don't run out and buy dive watches that often anyway. So.
Right. Yeah. No, same here. I, you know, like again, the caveat here is I haven't seen one in person. But it looks, you know, on paper, you know, I would agree with Ian. It seems to be like a very compelling watch for the price, even given that it's somewhat more expensive than your average Christopher Ward dive watch. And I think it's just another example of how this brand is kind of like continuing to kind of like push up against like a higher level, you know, with every kind of new release. They get a little bit more ambitious, and like even with something as kind of like straightforward as like a, you know, a dive watch in their like core dive watch collection, they're still finding ways to innovate and to make it like a little bit better with the lume. It's also like pretty thin. I think it's
under 11.
Yeah. Which is really good for a watch with, I think it has 300 meters of water resistance, which is.
Yes, 300 meters with a glass case back, which, you know, also can add thickness, I think, because you need to have more seals and there. So yeah, no, the features are very, and that's, I'll just say, I mean, my experience with Christopher Ward watches over the last several years has been that, I mean, none of them have been a letdown in terms of fit and finish. So I don't imagine why this one would be, you know, like it'll probably feel in hand the way you expect it to, you know, like a nicely finished, very light titanium watch. 41 millimeters is an interesting size. That might actually be a really nice size for it too.
It's the same size as the current Submariner is 41 millimeters. Is a Pelagos 41 millimeters, or is that 42? In any case, it's like it's certainly like kind of like in the neighborhood of like, you know, a lot of the divers that you're either cross shopping or looking to kind of like get in under, you know, if you're looking for like a deal on something, you know, the Christopher Ward, as opposed to like, you know, like a Tudor or a, you know, Longines or something, you know. So I think it's a pretty compelling product. They make a lot of compelling products, and I think, you know, continue to kind of like hit on all cylinders, like doing things that are both, you know, like experimental, like the, you know, the 12X and the Belcanto, and also like these like core watches, like the C60. So. But we'll have one soon. So hopefully, you know, hands-on impressions coming relatively quickly to the website. All right, Zach, you want to ask another question here?
Yeah, I got another one from Scott Tarlow. How much of a premium do you put on dial color? There is a watch I want where the blue dial is 50% more than the black dial. I prefer the blue dial, but I could get 2 watches or save money if I went with the black dial. So there's a little bit of a personal anecdote there on top of it, but as the driver for the question, do you put a premium on dial color?
I mean, it's, if you're talking about like the delta between like one color and the other representing multiple watches, like that seems like a lot. That seems like a pretty like big premium. I suppose it depends on, you know, you just kind of have to ask yourself like how much you love the dial color, and how I guess like how I would assume if it's that much more expensive, it's like it's limited in some way compared to like the standard version. And like I think it's fair to put a premium on something that's scarce. You know, that seems reasonable to me. It's just ultimately a very personal thing as to whether or not you go for that. I personally probably wouldn't. Like I if I love the watch, I probably love it in like multiple dial colors, and I probably wouldn't wind up going for one that's like dramatically more expensive than another.
Yeah.
That's sort of where I come down. But what do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, dramatically more, no. That's like, that feels right. And I'm kind of curious what watch that is, that it would be so much more. But I do think like the right color can be the driving factor for me to make a watch purchase. So when the right color comes along, and maybe it is a limited edition, and so it is more like, I might not care too much that it costs more if it really is like the perfect color,
Yeah.
I think the only circumstance where that maybe happened was the Grand Seiko SBGW 277. I think that was a little bit more than the like cream color version that was available at the time, because they're limited to 140 each, something like that. But another watch that I bought basically because of the color, the dial color, the Fairer Lander chronograph. I mean, there were other versions of that chronograph that were gorgeous, but they never pushed me over the line. But then when I saw that they had the Lander turquoise, I was just like, I can't not get it. Could not get it.
I'm trying to think of examples of if I've ever purchased a watch with like a more expensive like dial variant than like the base version. And I can't think of one offhand, but I can think of a brand that I like that kind of has this structure. And that's Arcanaut, because like Arcanaut has their regular Fordite dials, which is I have an Arcanaut with a normal Fordite dial, and then they have their their linear like sculpted Fordite dials, which are a little bit more expensive, not like dramatically. I think they're like $500 more on like a $4,000 or $4,500 watch, and like there's the reason for that is because it's like that cut of Fordite is like it's rarer, and there's also like more labor that goes into like finishing a dial like that. And I've looked at those dials, and I've thought like I'd probably like pay a slight premium for something like that, because they're cool. And I think it makes sense. I'm looking at the Slack thread, and someone asked Scott about the watch in particular, and he went on to say that in his case it's a Patek 5066, which is an Aquanaut. So
that's Nautilus tangential.
So that explains the large delta in price. So he's talking about the Japan edition with the blue dial versus a normal Aquanaut. So yeah, I mean that's a big jump, but it's also I think like a much more collectible piece probably, and might hold its value better. So like that's another consideration to make if you're looking at watches sort of like in that realm, I guess.
What I would also say is, assuming you can afford it, right? Like it's still within their power to buy it. I would get the one that you really want. Because if you get the other one, you're always going to look and be like, if I just spent a little bit more or whatever it was, I would have had that, blue or pink or whatever it is. And like,
that's a good point. Yeah.
It's always got second place.
Right. Yeah. Hitting up with silver. Yeah, that's a good point. You don't want to compromise. Ideally, you'd like to get something that like kind of, like checks all the proverbial boxes, and that you don't feel like you're getting kind of like short shrift on. I don't know if that's the case in Scott's case in particular, but interesting question. Dealing with Patek is a whole other beast though, in terms of like value retention and other factors. So
yeah, certainly.
All right, I'm going to ask the sandwich question.
I think it's time.
Yeah. So this question comes from John DeSicara. And he writes, if you're making a peanut butter sandwich, do you also put regular butter in it? I thought my wife was a monster for putting both in, but everyone I ask agrees with her. I'm beginning to fear she might be right. Always a profound fear when you realize your partner might be right. It's slowly dawning on me. Perhaps I am the monster. Zach, do you have a take on the peanut butter sandwich question with butter?
I've literally never heard of anybody putting butter on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich before this moment.
Yeah.
Feels
he's
very,
saying, just to be clear, he's not saying a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. He's saying just a peanut butter sandwich. So
peanut butter and butter.
Peanut butter and
the peanut butter sandwich.
Right.
A PBB. Yeah. I've never heard of that either. It feels vaguely French to me in some way.
Yeah.
It sounds good, particularly if it's perhaps toasted, and you get the nice liquidy butter sensation there. But no, I mean, Scott, you're not, or no, it wasn't Scott. What was his name?
This is John.
John, sorry. John, you're not a monster.
No, definitely not a monster. I've never heard of this. I've never heard of adding butter to a peanut butter sandwich. I honestly, I never even really consider just a peanut butter sandwich.
It's very sticky.
Yeah, very sticky.
Yeah.
Peanut butter and jelly obviously is it's a lot of sugar. It's not something you want to eat on a regular basis, but it's certainly nostalgic, appeal, I think, to a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And also, as a New Englander, I have to represent for peanut butter and fluff, which is a very strange thing, which I don't have a particular taste for, but I feel like I'd get my New England card revoked if I didn't at least mention it.
Being like a shelf-stable liquid marshmallow product.
Yeah. So a fluffernutter is what you would, what you'd call the sandwich. But yeah, it's marshmallow. It's really very strange thing that probably should be illegal. It probably shouldn't. It's one of those foods that has negative nutritional content. So don't.
That sounds like that has contributed to bad health in people over the ages. I like a good peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I agree. It's not an everyday kind of thing, but it's one of those. My favorite time is when you're like, I don't know what to do for dinner. I could sort of do nothing, but that doesn't feel right either. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yep. Yeah. No.
If I have bananas around, I'll chop one up and put there on there too.
So that's another thing. I think a peanut butter and banana sandwich is also appealing, but I've never. Yeah, the peanut butter thing is not something I've ever encountered. But I agree, it does sound good.
It might. I might have to try it.
Butter is good. Butter tastes great. Peanut butter is great. I agree. It sounds like something that should be toasted and warm. I don't think you want to try smearing cold butter on a.
Is this something imagine peanut butter and just patties of butter? It's a little different.
That's weird. Yeah, don't do that. Interesting question. Always glad to field sandwich questions on the podcast. I think we're better for it. I'd love to hear audience reactions to this one in particular. So maybe we can cut this out for social or something, and we can get some get a poll going on Instagram or something like that. Seems like what it's made for. All right, Zach. I think we got time for maybe a couple more questions. So you want to pick one?
What do you think has saved more lives of its wearers? All the mechanical watches in all of history, or the now 9-year-old Apple Watch, which is relevant because a new Apple Watch was just unveiled today. So
right,
look at that, timely.
This is interesting question. New Apple Watch today. That the big new health feature on the new Apple Watch is it can detect sleep apnea. If you're, I guess the accelerometer can detect somehow whether you stop breathing when you're you're asleep.
Interesting.
Which is I think if you factor that in to the next round, that could potentially save a lot of lives down the line, because the way sleep apnea can contribute to high blood pressure and heart disease and other ailments. That seems like a pretty big deal to me, honestly. Zach's having a cat now.
I was trying to move my cat and he got stuck on a teacup.
Yeah, we're not going to cut that out. That's part of the ambiance here.
I don't really want you to have to look at my cat's butt for too long, but I got punished for it. Yeah.
I think probably I'm probably the Apple Watch, honestly, because there's so many of them. So many of those watches have been produced. So many more will be produced. If we're factoring the new one, like I said, I think it's the Apple Watch. But this is this reminds me of that that question, what are there more of like stars in the sky or trees, like, and it's trees apparently, like
with stars in the sky. Like, what's your scope of
stars in our galaxy, stars in the Milky Way? There are more trees on planet Earth than stars in the Milky Way, which is like a crazy thing, but apparently that's accurate.
I find that disappointing.
Like, it's all,
it's a letdown.
But there's like billions and billions of trees, so it's like it's a crazy statistic. I could be also caveat. I'm not a scientist. I could be wrong. Yeah. I read this on the internet, so who knows? But
these all feel like those like consulting company interview question kind of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a fan of those.
My mind does not work that way.
Yeah, I think probably the Apple Watch, like,
I mean, the Apple Watch has features to save lives, right? Whereas watches can save lives if used in the right handed and right circumstances, right? And I'm sure there has. I mean, there's the Speedmaster Apollo 13, 11, 13. Which one was it? The Tom Hanks one?
Apollo 13. Yes.
Apollo 13.
That's the
critical one. Timing there. That's where the Snoopy Award comes from, right?
Yep.
Look at that. I mentioned in military circumstances, obviously, like there's potential lives having been saved from a well-timed incursion or something. I don't know. So, look, we can make it up, but yeah, probably not it's got to be the Apple Watch. Yeah. I mean, how many people wear Apple Watches? Everyone.
I mean, there's millions of those things. Like, there's and like they're potentially saving lives years down the line by like making you healthier now. So
it's also true.
Yeah. So
I don't have like the heart arrhythmia thing set up on mine. Like, you have to opt into these things, but
out of fear that you like will turn it on and then suddenly you realize I'm dying. Know. That's my fear with these.
It's a little creepy. It's not what I have the watch for, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe at a later age, I'll change my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna pick one more question to close us out here. Mike J asks. I feel like we get a version of this question every time, but I have like an answer for it this time that I think.
Okay.
I think it's an interesting topic I'd like to talk about. Do you have a list of watches to buy, or just make a move when you get the feels? Mike J's terms, get the feels.
Get the feels.
Do you have a list, or is it more of like?
I have a mental list of sorts. Like, there are watches and brands that I at some point would like to have.
Mm-hmm.
Less of a literal shopping list to like, here's this model and reference and whatever, and like I'm moving down that list. And then I would say, though, the feels is what pushes me towards any of one of those watches, and or anything that comes along that seems I'm more inclined to get.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's a cop-out answer of both,
Yeah. I think for me, it's increasingly the feels. It's watch buying is more of a like an emotional decision for me these days than like something that is like strictly planned out and thought out, which I think has its like pros and cons. The thing that I'm actually working on an editorial kind of like along these lines. Something that like I've noticed in my watch buying is like, I certainly have like a mental list of watches that like I like that I'd like to own, but in terms of like actually buying watches, it really comes down to like opportunity, and I think as you kind of like develop connections in the watch world, and not like professional connections from like working in the watch industry, just sort of like other collectors and like being part of a community, like you kind of naturally find yourself with like opportunities to buy things that you wouldn't otherwise have the chance, it could be, from like a post and like a sales, channel and like a chat group or something, or maybe you develop a relationship with with like a pre-owned dealer that you trust or whatever, and they call you up because they know your taste. And, those are things that like start happening like after a while of collecting watches. And that's sort of like more where, like, I wouldn't say like that's where I'm at like exclusively, but like I found that happens like more and more often. It's like I'll make a decision based on just like an opportunity that comes along at like the right time when it's the right watch. And maybe it's not something that I would have like considered, otherwise. It might not be a watch that was on that like mental list of things that I wanted to own previously.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, when they pop up on like Watch Recon or something, is sometimes you're like, oh, right, that one I was thinking about.
Yeah, and I think like we do that like also like in our, I mean, we send each other like links to things,
very much so.
Like all the time, which is sort of like in that like same category of just like, oh, like this Ketelars watch is available on from this like pre-owned dealer that we
had
know.
To bring that one up.
Yeah, it's gone. Like
is it gone?
It's gone. Yeah,
good.
Yeah,
that is a watch that should be purchased quickly. I'm glad to hear it was.
Yeah, never seen a Ketelars in the pre-owned market before. So yeah.
I'll say like the list thing, and because since it's not a literal list, it's sort of hard to like always have it top of mind. But like the last time I looked for a watch that was sort of on my list was the Sinn 256, which I ended up purchasing earlier this year. And that was a watch that like I used to have a Watch Recon alert for, and I had it for years, and they almost never came up. And then when they did, they were too much at the time. Mm-hmm. And then I just forgot about it. And then just one random day when I was sitting doing something particularly boring, I was just like waiting for somebody. I searched it again, and there it was, golden opportunity, great price, messaged the guy, and just immediately started talking. And it was like, I had to do it. Just had to do it. And you know what? It's so nice to have that, because that watch was on my list, and it's like, it's what I was hoping it would be. It's, also a timely watch because it's like a smaller version of the 156, which Sinn just reissued.
Yep.
And I love the Sinn 156, but I owned a vintage one, and it was just too big for my wrist. It was uncomfortable to wear. Though I kind of want to get another one day because I like, it's so cool looking.
Yeah, no, that is a cool piece. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to end it for this Q&A. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question on both Instagram and through our Slack channel. Like I said, we'll leave a link in the show notes so that you can join our Slack if you're not already in there. If you want to ask us sandwich questions for future Q&As, we should do an all sandwich Q&A at some point. Why not? I think that'd be fun. I could talk for days about sandwiches. It's watches and sandwiches, probably the things I can opine about easiest, and movies too.
And I was kind of hoping we were like going to go over like recent great sandwiches we had, when I heard there was a sandwich question, but it's okay.
Do you have a recent great sandwich that you want to shout out?
Yeah. Yes, I will.
Okay.
And this is a little, I'm not like, I have all relation to this place because my friend is a chef there. So, shout out to their friend, but Le Perche in Hudson, New York has a spicy fried chicken sandwich that my chef friend did create. But I mean, it was something else. What am I going to say? It was something else. It was like, it's delicious batter, had some like Szechuan peppercorn in that mix,
Sounds good.
It was really good, and it had a proper amount of spice. It was like just a genuinely blissful sandwich.
I love a blissful sandwich. Yeah. That's the best. That's the best. I had a bunch of club sandwiches when I was in Geneva for Geneva Watch Days. I
know that club sandwich. It's good.
Yeah. I had the Grand Duke club sandwich was it hit the spot in between meetings a couple times actually. So all right. Thanks, Zach, for coming on and joining me for the Q&A episode. It's always a lot of fun.
My pleasure. Yeah.
And thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time on the Worn and Wild podcast. Take care.